Alright, here's our video on converting measurement units with ratios. So for example, let's say you had cups and you want to convert them to gallons. Well, the first thing you need to know is how many cups are in a gallon. The first thing you need to know for anything when you're converting is how many of one thing is in another thing. Now you don't have to memorize these. We'll go over them in class, and during quizzes and tests I'll have a chart, a reference chart for you. Some, though, I want you to memorize, and we'll go over that in class. So there are 16 cups to 1 gallon. So the ratio is 16 to 1. Cups to gallons. However, if I said gallons to cups, it's 1 to 16. So you can do it either way, as long as you label which ones you're doing. Okay? So there's 16 cups to 1 gallon. Let's say I had a question for you, and I said we had 108 cups. I want to know how many gallons is in 108 cups. Well, the first thing we need to know, and the first step you should know for any of these questions, is how many are in what item you're using. So in this case, we want to know how many cups are in a gallon. Cups to gallons. So we already know there's 16 cups to 1 gallon. That's the first step. We have it. So now what do we do? Now it's just simply dividing. The second step is just dividing. Dividing. So the number you always use first is the number you want to convert, and divide it by the unit rate, which is 16. In this case, it would be 16 cups. Divide that, and there's your answer. So remember, the first number is always in the box. First number is in the box. And the first number is always the number when we're making it like a fraction. So you would get, and this answer would be 6.75. When you get your answer, see if it makes sense. We know gallons are more than cups. So if you have 108 cups, you'll have 6.75 gallons. Now to check your work, just do the opposite operation. 108 divided by 16 gives us 6.75. So 6.75 times 16 will give you 108. That's how you check. There's another way of doing this now. So again, we wanted to know about 108 cups. And how many of those are in a gallon? We already know, not in 1 gallon, but we know 108 cups equals 6.75 gallons. But let's say we didn't know that. Right? We can do equivalent ratios. So the first thing we want to know is how many cups are in 1 gallon. So there's our first ratio. 16 cups, 1 gallon. Cups, gallons. We're labeling them. Again, you could put gallons. You can put gallons on top if you want, if you just label them. So an equivalent ratio, and remember we did equivalent ratios, we can get another ratio that's equal to it. So 16 cups is 1 gallon. 108 cups will be X. And that X is the unknown number, which we already know what it is. It's 6.75. But let's say you didn't know, you would write it like this. And by the way, 2 equivalent ratios are called proportions. That's our new key word here, proportions. Proportions are equal ratios. So what you can do here is 16 times what number gives us 108? We'll do the same for the denominator, the same number, and there's your answer. So 16 times what is 108? If you didn't know, you just divide it. You're multiplying going left to right, you can divide going right to left. Okay, and when we divided this, we already know 16 times 6.75 gives us 108. So 1 times 6.75 gives us 6.75. So that's how we can do it using equivalent ratios, which are called proportions. Whatever way is easier for you, you can do. But get used to doing proportions. Okay, and as you know by now, I always lose my eraser. Ah, there it is. Let's do another problem. Let's say I have, we had 40 inches to feet. We want to convert inches to feet. The first step. What is the first step? First step, of course, is how many inches are in a foot. There's 12 inches in 1 foot. So a ratio is 12 to 1. It also could be 1 to 12. Depends how we label it. So here we're labeling inches and feet. So this would be feet and inches, depending on how you want to do it. And either way is fine as long as you label it. So the first step is to find out how many inches are in a foot, not in a feet. Improper. And we know it's 12. So what's the second step? Well, we're going to make equal ratios here. We have 12 inches is 1 foot. So 40 inches is how many feet? There's our equal ratio. So 12 times what number is 40? And we'll do the same for the denominator. If we didn't know, we can just do the opposite operation. So we're just simply dividing again. 40 divided by 12. So what would you get? Well, if you divided that, you would get 3. I'll write it over here. 3.33 continue. The 3 will go on forever. So roughly, you could say roughly, and that's the about sign. X would be about 3.3 continuing. So if there's 12 inches in 1 foot, 40 inches is about 3.3 feet. Okay, let's use yards now. Let's say I had how many yards? Well, let's make it harder, actually. Let's say 3.6 yards equals how many miles? And if we don't know the number, we just put an X. That's the variable. So what's the first thing we need to know? What's the first step? Well, the first step is to know how many yards are in a mile. So there's 1,760 yards in 1 mile. So there's our unit rate already. So as you can see by now, probably figured out we're doing unit rates, which we did before. And logically, if you looked at this, if there's 1,760 yards in 1 mile, 3.6 yards won't even equal a mile. So this answer has to be a fraction because it's not going to be 1. It's going to be much less than 1, just logically. Bring it over so you can see it better. So again, the first step was finding how many yards are in a mile. By the way, that's 1,760 yards is about 18 football fields. About 18 football fields, right? Go Jets. Actually, it's 17.6, but we can say it's about 18 football fields. So if you go from this end zone to the other end zone, right? You do that, that's 100, do that 18 times, well, less than 18 times, but close to 18 times, you'll get 1 mile. What's the second step? So let's make 2 equal ratios so we can see what we're doing here. We're saying that 1,760 yards is 1 mile. And we're labeling them yards, miles. Again, you could flip it around if you label it. And we want to find out how many miles is 3.6 yards, and there's our X. So there's our equivalent ratio. So 1,760 times what is 3.6? Whatever that is, we'll do the same on the bottom. So if we don't know, again, we're going to do the opposite operation. So we're doing 3.6 divided by 1,760. Yes, this is a smaller number. And we know that already. Why it's smaller? Because if 1,760 yards is 1 mile, 3.6 yards is not going to be anywhere near 1 mile. That's why the 3.6 comes first. It also comes first because it's right here, it's last. Multiplication this way, division that way. 3.6 is in the box, remember that. You'll get this answer, 0.002. So, if 1 mile equals 1,760 yards, then 3.6 yards would be 2,000th of a mile. 2,000th of a mile. Alright, here's another question that may be a little tricky. Let's say you get this question. A tiger needs 4 tablespoons of medicine for every 25 pounds of weight. So read that question again. Tiger needs 4 tablespoons of medicine for every 25 pounds of weight. And let's say the tiger weighs 45 stones. So the first step you might be saying is, what is a stone? What is a stone? That's your first question. Well, a stone, in England, they use stones. And 1 stone is 14 pounds. So there's our first thing. So now we know that a tiger weighs 14, it weighs 45 stones, and 1 stone is 14 pounds. So what do we do next? We need to know if he weighs 45 stones, so 1 stone is 14 pounds, 45 stones is what? There's our equivalent ratios again. And by the way, you don't have to label it this way. You could have reversed it. Right? You could have did 1 over 14 equals 45x. Whatever's easier for you. And here you can see 1 times 45 is 45, so 14 times 45 will give us our answer. You can see that if you did that, the tiger would weigh 630 pounds. A very big kitty cat. And tigers, they're the biggest cat in the world. They're bigger than lions, and they're extremely powerful. So again, with this question, we had 3 measurements, and we found out what a stone was. A stone is 14 pounds. So now, the second step. What's the second step? And by the way, you can see by this human, he's not running too fast, so the tiger must not be chasing him. So the tiger weighs 630 pounds, and he's going to get medicine. He's going to get 4 tablespoons for every 25 pounds. So what is the next thing we need to know for the second step? Every 25 pounds he weighs, he's getting 4 tablespoons. We can write equivalent ratios here. 4 tablespoons every 25 pounds. And he weighs 630 pounds. 4 tablespoons, 25 pounds. How many tablespoons for 630 pounds? There's our equivalent ratio. So if you divide that, remember you divide going this way, you can see 630 divided by 25 is 25.2. Then we can times going the other way. 4 times 25.2, 25 times 25.2, do the same for the top and the bottom. So, and we'll know that x now would equal 100.8 tablespoons. A lot of tablespoons you want to give a tiger. And I'm not sure you want to be that trainer giving tablespoons to a tiger. I think there's another or better, more efficient way to give a tiger medicine. I mean, look how big a tiger is. You gotta really trust that tiger. Maybe a bottle may be better, right? Okay, so let's just review here. So again, when you're doing questions like this, the first step is to try to find out how many of one item goes into another item. That's the first step. And then once you have that information, you can make equivalent ratios and divide and multiply. Great job.